My name is Olivia. I am a journalist from Odessa and I can hear the city as if it had veins. That evening, the sea was breathing slowly, and the windows of the houses were glowing with small lights, when a short message appeared. I saw your story about the storm. Your voice is inspiring. Caption, Ethan Miller, an architect from New York. I opened his profile and came across a photo of the Brooklyn Bridge, which smelled of night. He was laughing, and behind him was the city that never tires of blinking. I replied, thank you. Do you have wine there too? He wrote about the rain that suddenly hit Manhattan, about the taxi driver who turned on jazz as if he was raising the roof. We exchanged a few more lines, how coffee smells on different shores, whether we like silence. I felt a bridge awaken between us, built of voices, short pauses, and smileys. When he asked if I was okay with a video call tomorrow, I suddenly felt as startled as a schoolgirl. Tomorrow, right? At 9 o'clock, your time or mine? We counted the hours for a long time, confused the times, laughed at the arithmetic of distance. Before going to bed, I left the window open to hear the sea and whispered into the darkness, New York. The word echoed in me like a wave touching the shore. I didn't know if it was a story or a random ray, but I felt a slight anxiety, like a premonition of spring and the first step in the dark. Real. I put my laptop on the windowsill so that the sea was visible behind me. Ethan appeared in a small rectangle, disheveled hair, black t-shirt, lights behind his shoulders like scattered necklaces. We said hello at the same time and laughed as if someone had flipped a shame switch. The camera swayed slightly, the sound sometimes faded, but I could hear seagulls in my headphones. Is that what you have there? He asked. Yes, the sea can't be silent, I replied. He told me about his day, a meeting in the studio, drawings that couldn't find a breath. I told him about an interview with a captain who called the waves by their names. When we searched for common words, our hands helped us. He showed me a notebook with the lines of a bridge, I a notebook with phrases that smelled of salt. You have a voice like a bridge holding water, he said. I smiled shyly and felt the window in the room grow wider. We took a sudden excursion. I turned the camera to the boulevard with chestnut trees, he to the street where pizza smelled of pepper and rain. When the connection was lost, we simultaneously wrote, "Are you still here?" and laughed again. Then we were silent for a long time, without opening the windows, and watched our screens glow with the same warm light, although between us was the ocean, watches, oars, borders, and the unfamiliar word, we. I was afraid to press the exit button. Today. We talked until dawn. I had tea in a transparent glass, he had dark coffee that smelled of the night subway. Ethan showed me drawings like maps of future streets. I read my lines, searching for a shore in the words. He said he loved buildings that let light into the most modest room. I replied that I loved texts that let air into the darkest heart. A ritual developed between us. He touched the paper with a pencil, I touched the keys with my fingers. We confessed nonsense. He was afraid of stuck elevators, I was afraid of empty inboxes and silence after a question. He laughed at my cats bursting into the frame, I laughed at his attempts to pronounce "privas" without an accent. Say it again, he asked, and I spoke as words flowed down the Potemkin stairs. When the sky in the east turned gray, I stood at the window and covered my shoulders with a blanket. You're tired, he said. Happy, I replied. I don't know when exactly in our conversation an invisible door opened, but someone warm and stubborn came through it. I thought I heard New York wink at me from its windows. We said goodbye, pausing as if we were holding the edge of a scarf. I fell asleep close to the screen and had a dream where the bridge itself floated to the shore, looking for my name. Without a ticket, courage. During the day, he carried me around the city like a camera on his shoulder. Ethan turned on his phone and walked through Manhattan, commenting as if the two of us were making a movie. Here's the bookstore where I grew up, here's the pizza you eat standing up, here's the windows where stories always live, he said. I could smell the pepper and the rain even through the screen. Now it's your turn, he said. I turned the camera to Primorsky Boulevard, chestnut trees held up the sky like umbrellas, a woman was laughing into her phone, a boy was launching a paper boat into a puddle. Even your puddles are the sea, Ethan whispered, and I saved that phrase for a rainy day. I pointed to the Potemkin stairs, where every step was like a marching beat. He pointed to the Brooklyn Bridge, where every line was like a string. When the connection snapped, we stopped at the same time, and it seemed as if the whole world had stopped, waiting to see if our invisible cable would hold. He sang me half a line of old jazz, shyly but frankly. I read a few lines of my text. We exchanged phrases like souvenirs, sun in the concrete, salt on the lips. In parting, he said, "Thank you for taking me to the sea." I replied, "Thank you for putting windows for me." And at that moment it seemed to me that we had connected the two shores with a thin thread that could be broken with a word, but not with a touch. Never. We invented our own vocabulary of distance. He would say, "Elevator," I would answer, "Lift," and we would both laugh because something completely different was lifting us up, his chords, my reporting excitement, our ill-timed jokes. Ethan would confuse privas with privas, I would confuse queens with queen, and there was warmth in these mistakes, like someone else's sweater borrowed for the rain. He created a morning radio for me. He would send a voice from the bookstore, read excerpts from O. Henry and Ryder, swallow Ukrainian letters, and laugh like a boy. I would answer with night reports from the port, where the cranes resemble cranes, and the lighthouse is an attentive watchman who never blinks. We joked about our time zones. When it's midnight for me, it's still evening for him. When it's dawn for him, I'm just learning to be silent again. Sometimes the internet cut off sentences, left half of the words, but the meaning held like a knot in a rope. "Are you happy today?" he asked. "Yes," I answered, although sometimes I was afraid of my yes. The first jealousy came in tiny needles. Someone liked him. Someone wrote me, "Beautiful dress." We laughed at ourselves, but I heard the word tenderness appear in the dictionary. We agreed to say little things out loud, not to disappear without explanation, to touch the truth even when it scratches our fingers, and to protect our laughter. Especially at night over the ocean. Together. That evening we laughed so much that the neighbors probably thought there was a party in the room. Ethan showed how his cat danced on the keyboard, and I played the news anchor, solemnly announcing, "An architect from New York has been recognized as the best pasta chef on the planet." He threw the fork, but it fell, and we both burst into laughter. The internet stopped us several times on ridiculous frames, my mouth open, his eyebrow raised, and that made it even funnier. At some point, I felt that this laughter filled the space that had previously been lonely. We invented a game. He would show me an object from the apartment, and I had to come up with a story as if it were a character. His watch turned out to be an old sailor, my cup, a dreamer who longs for a couple from New York. We stopped feeling that there was a camera, we simply looked at each other, as if our rooms had long been connected by a door. "Do you know that laughter is also love?" he suddenly asked. I was taken aback, but I answered, "If so, then we are already in love." And the silence after that became deeper than the sea. There was more truth in it than in all the words put together. One day he took out his guitar. I was sitting by the window, holding a cup of mint, and Ethan at first awkwardly adjusted the strings, as if he was afraid of sounding fake. "I haven't played for anyone in a long time," he admitted. And he played a melody that smelled of a night city, a little sadness, a little jazz, a little hope. I listened to a new bridge emerge in the room, not from concrete, but from chords. When he finished, I couldn't help but read a few of my lines. My voice trembled, but the words sounded like waves. We created a strange duet, an architect and a journalist, notes and letters, New York and Odessa. "Shall we record an album?" he joked. "Let's call it Ocean," I replied. In those moments, the camera ceased to be a screen. I felt him next to me, as if he were sitting on the floor with my cats. And then he said, "I'd like to play this for you, Liv." I couldn't answer, because my throat was choked with a lump. I just smiled, and my eyes filled with water on their own. "Are you crying?" he asked quietly. "No, I'm learning to listen with my heart," I whispered. And it seems he believed me too. The quarrel came unexpectedly, like a summer rain. I woke up, opened the messenger and saw a photo of him with friends, a woman touching his shoulder. My heart beat faster than thought. I wrote a short message, "Have a great time." He replied immediately, "Yes, we celebrated a colleague's birthday." It seemed to me that the words were dry as stones. I closed my laptop, but he called. We spoke loudly, sharply, as if with knives. I reproached, he defended himself. "You don't trust me," he snapped. "Stay away, not trust, but torture," I replied. We fell silent, and the silence between us was worse than a fight. For the first time, I thought, maybe we were too far away. In the evening, I sat on the seashore, listening to the waves crashing against the rocks, and asked myself, is this love real, if one photo can break it? My phone was flashing with messages, but I didn't open it. I wanted him to feel the emptiness. And that night I realized, the greatest enemy of our love is not other people, but fear. The fear of losing each other in the digital cracks. The next day he wrote a letter. Not a short message, but a real letter, several pages, with descriptions of his childhood, his fears, and his dreams. He admitted that he was afraid not of my jealousy, but of the fact that one day I would not want to wait. "I am an architect, I build bridges. But the bridge between us is the most difficult project," he wrote. I reread the lines and felt my heart soften. I replied with my own letter. I told him about Odessa, the smell of the sea, cats, and childhood memories of Privas. And I added, "I am afraid of silence. Please do not be silent." In the evening we got in touch. At first it was awkward, but he showed me the same letter in his hands. "This is all me," he said. I smiled and raised mine. "And this is me." We held the letters up to the cameras at the same time, and it seemed to me that they touched. I felt warmth where there had been a crack yesterday. And for the first time I understood, our quarrels are also part of the construction. There are no real bridges without cracks. I waited impatiently for his call, like a child waiting for a holiday. Minutes passed, but the screen remained dark. I walked around the room, checked the connection, blamed the internet, but my heart knew, I was afraid of something else, that he wouldn't call. When the screen finally lit up, I almost cried with relief. "Sorry, I was late at work," he said, and his voice sounded tired. I wanted to reproach, but instead I whispered, "I thought you disappeared." He smiled sadly, "I will never disappear without saying goodbye." We were silent, listening to our breaths fill the pauses. I sat with the phone next to my heart, as if he were really there. And then I understood, in the distance, the greatest burden is waiting. It is heavier than the ocean, heavier than silence. I swallowed back my tears and said, "Call me even for a minute. I can't stand the darkness." He nodded and raised his hand to the camera, as if touching my face. I answered in the same way. And for a moment it seemed to me that we really touched. This is how love is born at a distance, in minutes of waiting that become an eternity. That night I hardly slept. I dreamed that he was sitting next to me and drawing in my notebook for me. I woke up and listened to the sea, as if it could convey his breath. When the phone finally rang, I answered instantly, without a hello. "Weren't you asleep?" he asked. "Slept with you," I whispered. We laughed like fools, but inside I felt that it was true. His image lived in my dreams more strongly than in the video. I told him how I dreamed of a city in the rain, and he told me how he dreamed of a shore with waves. Our dreams seemed to intertwine, as if someone were drawing them with one hand. I was afraid to wake up completely, so as not to lose this common space. And then he said, "Maybe dreams are the only country where we don't need tickets." I agreed and thought, if we ever meet in person, I will definitely ask him to tell me that dream again, to make sure that it really existed. The next day I received the delivery. There was a courier on the doorstep with a rose in a glass flask. I was confused. The note had only one word, Ethan. I laughed and cried at the same time, because the distance suddenly seemed shorter. When we got in touch, I showed the flower to the camera. He smiled as if he had won the war. "I wanted you to have a piece of my city," he said. I looked at the rose and thought, how ironic that this fragile flower crossed the ocean faster than us. I put it by my bed, and every time I woke up at night, I saw how the moonlight made the petals transparent. "You're crazy," I joked. "I know," he replied. And there was more tenderness in that, "I know," than in any, "I love you." I decided to answer him in my own way. I went to Priva's and bought an old postcard with a view of Odessa, cobblestones, a tram, the sea. I wrote on the back, "So you know where to look for me." I mailed it to him, imagining his hands touching the paper, which still had my warmth on it. When he received the postcard, he called immediately. "It smells like the sea," he said. "That's because I held it near the wave," I joked. We exchanged little things, but each of them became part of a big ritual. He showed me that he had attached the postcard to the refrigerator. I was so moved that I stared at him silently for 5 minutes. And only then did I say, "Someday I want this postcard to bring you here. I will use it." We started counting the days. A calendar appeared in my notebook. I crossed out each square with a red marker. 32 more, I said. 31 more, he corrected. We invented a new ritual, dreaming out loud. He described how we would walk through New York together, how we would sit on the pier in Odessa. We even argued here. He said that pizza was better, that black sea fish was invincible. We planned the meeting as if we were building a house. Every little thing became a brick. But sometimes I caught his eye and felt fear. What would happen when the waiting was over? Would our love withstand reality? He seemed to sense my doubts and say, "I will come, and we will find out." And I nodded, although my heart was trembling. At some point, real doubt seized me. I sat on the shore and watched the waves roll in one after the other. What if everything falls apart when we meet? What if we don't recognize each other off-screen? I asked myself. I called him, unable to hold back. "Ethan, aren't you afraid?" He was silent for a few seconds, and then he said, "I am afraid. But I am afraid of not trying anymore." I listened to his voice and felt my fear dissolve. We agreed, we would be honest to the end. Even if the truth hurt. "We are not perfect," he added. "But we are real." And then I realized, maybe authenticity is more important than perfection. I saved this thought like the most precious pebble from the sea, and placed it next to the rose on the table. The second quarrel was even more painful. We sat silently behind the screens, me with a cup of tea, he with an empty glass of wine. Words did not come, only long pauses. I looked at him and thought, have we really exhausted everything? "You're not here," I finally said. "I'm always here," he replied. "But I don't feel it," I whispered. He clenched his fist as if he wanted to break through a wall. "The distance is killing me," he suddenly shouted. I fell silent, because I felt the same way. Our eyes met, and there was so much pain in them that I realized, we were arguing not with each other, but with the ocean. We ended the call with a cold, "See you tomorrow." But I cried into my pillow all night, and the sea also roared louder, as if it sympathized. That night I had a dream. I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, and he was walking towards me. We stopped in the middle, and neither of us spoke. We just touched hands, and the bridge lit up like a Christmas tree. I woke up in tears and immediately called him. He picked up the phone sleepily, but his first word stunned me. "I dreamed I met you on the bridge." I froze. We told each other our dreams and realized that we had seen the same thing. It was strange, mystical, as if someone higher was playing with our hearts. "Maybe this is a sign," he whispered. "That it's time to wake up the dreams," I added. And then he nodded silently. A few days later he wrote, "I bought a ticket." I reread the message a dozen times to believe it. "When?" I asked with trembling fingers. "In a month," he replied. My heart was pounding as if I had run a marathon. I laughed and cried at the same time. We called each other, and he showed me the electronic ticket, as if it were a victory over fate. "Now you are my reality," he said. I touched the screen, as if I could feel its warmth. We began to count the days even harder, to dream even more. And for the first time, I believed, our story would have an ending that you could touch with your hands. The weight became unbearable. I walked around the city and imagined showing him the cafes where I loved to write, the stairs where I sat as a student, the beach where I first fell in love. I couldn't sleep. I woke up to every message, my heart jumping out like a cat on a windowsill. Every minute seemed like an eternity. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "Yes," I confessed. "But it's a good anxiety. It smells like the sea." He laughed and said, "I'm afraid of flying, but I'm more afraid of not seeing you." I threw the phone on the pillow and circled the room like a madman. Sometimes it seemed to me that the distance only increased, because now I knew the date and couldn't bring it closer by a second. The day of his trip arrived. He called me from the airport, the noise, the announcements, the noise of people. I saw his eyes, excited and happy at the same time. "You really are flying," I repeated like a mantra. "I'm already flying to you," he smiled. When he got to the landing, the connection was lost. I sat by the sea and looked at the horizon. Each wave resembled a heart beating along with mine. I counted the hours and caught myself thinking, now I'm afraid of something else, that something will happen to the plane, that fate will take it away from me again. I prayed to the sea to become calm, not angry. That night Odessa did not sleep with me. I went out to the sea in the morning. In my hands I held a bouquet of wildflowers, not roses, not lilies, but simple Odessa flowers, with the smell of the sun. I wanted him to feel the authenticity of this city right away. I sat on a stone, listened to the waves and looked at my watch. His plane should already be in the air. I imagined him looking out the window and seeing the same water that was now touching my feet. It seemed to me that we were already together, just separated by different heights. People walked by, laughing, and I was all in my own world. The sea whispered, "Soon." I closed my eyes and imagined his footsteps behind me, his voice next to me. And the thought made me dizzy. The airport greeted me with noise and the smell of coffee. I stood in the crowd, holding flowers, and felt my hands shaking. The scoreboard said, "Arrival." My heart leapt into my throat. People came out of the doors one after another, smiling, tired, indifferent. I searched for his face, and every second stretched into eternity. And suddenly he appeared. With a suitcase, in a black jacket, a little confused. His eyes immediately found mine. At that moment, the world disappeared. There was no airport, no noise, no people. There was only us. I took a step forward and felt my legs give way. He dropped his suitcase and walked toward me. When our eyes met a few meters away, I felt that everything that had come before was just a prologue. I had seen him so many times on the screen, but now every feature of his face lived differently. He held out his hand, I held out mine. Our fingers touched, and it was stronger than any words. I felt a warmth that no screen could convey. "You are real," he whispered. "And you?" I asked. We both laughed through tears. People walked by, but to us they did not exist. We stood like children seeing the sea for the first time. His embrace was bigger than the world. I pressed myself against him and heard his heartbeat. It was the loudest heart I had ever known. I breathed in the scent of his jacket, a little bit of coffee, a little bit of the city, a little bit of the road. He held me as if he was afraid to let go, and I wasn't going to let go. "Finally," he said. I didn't answer, I just cried. They were tears of relief, joy, fear that we would never be the same again. He stroked my hair and whispered, "I'm home." And I realized, he really was home, here, in my arms. We left the airport together. Odessa greeted him with the sea breeze and the smell of coffee from the nearest kiosk. He took my hand, and I felt our steps synchronize. "Will you show me your sea?" he asked. Of course, I smiled. We walked, not letting go of each other, and the whole world seemed new. I knew, there would be new quarrels ahead, new laughter, new expectations. But now they would be there. We reached the embankment, and I showed him the horizon. "See?" I said. This is the same sea that spoke to you every night. He hugged me even tighter. And at that moment I understood. New York and Odessa were no longer 2 points. They merged into one word, we.